Okay, hey everybody, welcome to the 10,000 Minute Experiment, and this is going to be a great episode. By the end, we've got tears and some pretty beautiful breakthroughs, so just stick in there with us. And if you guys want to give towards 10,000 Minutes and partner with us, that would be amazing. So just go to 10,000minutes.com and you'll see in the upper right it says donate, or just go there to find different resources to help you join Jesus all week long. All right, we've got Sir Dave Gibbons on this episode, and it is so powerful. Dave is kind of like a sage. He's a consultant for all these people. I mean, he's consulted Kobe Bryant. He consults all these major leaders all over the world. And Dave has become a friend. This is so good. You can also check him out at 3culture.com. That's the number 3culture.com. Okay, get ready. All right, everybody. Welcome to 10,000 Minute Experiment with Tim Timmons. We've got Amoy Donice.
Woo, I'm back. Hello.
And the Chris Cleveland over here to my hot left.
Hey, guys.
And guys, in front of us, in on the Zooms, again, it's something that it's a new way of recording things.
Don't know
I'm
if
trying
you've
to
heard
get
about
that sponsorship, but
Zoom. We have a hero on the other side of this. Now, before everybody came in, I told my kids who was going to be on today, and they were like so stoked because this human, just with his words and gifting, actually put like a crazy thumbprint on my kids and spoke actual blessings. So when we were talking about blessings, in that season, we actually hung out with this guy. So I'll start off so you could be in the conversation. This is Dave Gibbons, everybody. Woo! We went on this little retreat with Dave and his wife and some other families. And as we were talking about blessing, and the word blessing did not mean at that point or at any time to give a financial thing, but biblically it was to call out what already exists in people. And Dave has known this for years, so we're just kind of catching up to all this stuff. But Dave began to do that with my kids. Oh, it was so powerful. It continues to be powerful in my home with my family. So just as a dad, I am so thankful for your life, Dave. So thank you for that.
Well, Tim, it was a fun joy to finally meet you and also all the kids, man. That was a pleasant surprise to see the joy that they had. That several days was significant for me to see that it could work with children and teenagers.
What he's referring to is this trip that I took with my family and a few other amazing families and Dave and his wife. We had everybody on the trip draw out their story on a storyboard, on a big cardboard piece of paper. No words were allowed, and they just had to tell the things that shaped them. So even my kids from 14 to 10, we had high school students. They were all writing down the things that shaped them in their stories. Everybody in the room would actually then end up blessing whoever just told their story. And by blessing, we don't mean giving them financial things. It was more about calling out what already exists, what we see in them. It was one of the most powerful times I've probably had in my life, especially with my family. And whenever Dave would speak, it was so profound because he wasn't just looking at them with his eyes. He literally had these eyes of God. And so later in this episode, he starts just talking about Chris and Amoy and calling them out on some beautiful things and blessing them. I mean, it was just like real time. And both of them were literally crying at the end. So stay tuned, get ready, and let's see what God has for us. So here's what we're in. We're in the series right now on practicing the presence of God just in our daily lives. And the stuff that the place that is, so many places, but you deal with a lot of people in the workplace. And I just wanted to talk about what does that look like? What do you learn as you're consulting with people, as you're walking with so many people from so many different places in life? What do you learn about people, and how do we actually see Jesus and join Jesus in the workplace? What are you seeing, or what do you learn there?
Well, the first thing is, I think the binary approach that we've been taking our faith, where you have the institutional church on one side, and everybody is centered, the life of people center around the orbit of really the church itself and the senior leadership and their vision for the city. And then the people are supposed to go out and then basically bring them back to the hub somehow. So everything's centered around the silo of the church. Whereas when I look at the marketplace, I see this unique sphere where it's really the center of so much activity of what God's doing. And they're ill-equipped in terms of how to integrate their faith beyond trying to bring someone back to church or doing like a bait and switch, be nice to someone so that you can invite them to come to church.
Right.
Or some programmatic way, like, hey, we're going to have a Bible study or a prayer group at lunchtime. And I said, what a sorry life. That's a sorry presentation of really integration. I said, what would it look like? And the question started coming, what would it look like where if you went to work on Monday, it was even better than Sunday? And where you could feel the presence of God in all the activity of your work. And then what bothered me too was the conversation in evangelicalism where it focused mostly upon the talk of faith and work. And so they identify what they call like the 7 mountains of influence, but they would never really discuss, well, how do you build cities on these mountains? How do you go underground and help people to live so that they love every day and they're not just waiting for the Sunday of the week.
Wow. How do you do that? What does this look like? Because I think we do. We all see church as a Sunday morning thing, the thing we do, which we know biblically is so not the thing the Bible would prescribe, that we are the church, gathered and scattered. So what's that look like for us to be more aware? I mean, it is like we're on mission in all places, but not in the same way that I guess we've always thought is like, I'm going to go win these souls. It's like, I'm on a mission just to join Jesus in whatever he's doing.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of this has to deal first with our mindset. It's not a life of either or, like faith and work. It's about a life of A-N-D, right? It's like Jesus was both heaven and earth. He was abstract and he was fully human. And then, when you think about the Lord's Prayer, it talks about, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So what would it look like if we're not supposed to just wait someday to experience heaven, but that we can experience heaven right now? In fact, Jesus says, if we become like children, you can enter the kingdom of heaven. And so I'm thinking, whoa, there's a lot more to this than this maybe a Sunday thing and wait till I get to heaven. The world's just getting more sucky all the time. Maybe the reality is if I can experience the presence of God as I go to work, as I'm preparing for work, as I'm in work, that's like 5 days of the week. And so what it looked like to me was first mindset-wise, and maybe this is a true possibility to experience God beyond a Sunday worship service for 1 hour. And then if it is, what does it look like? And I think a lot of it came down to this whole issue of prayer, because I think the way we've defined prayer is more of a talk to God. And the secondary aspect would be listen to the word of God in terms of like the read the Bible. So the Bible is the next revelation for us. And then once in a while, there's certain elite people that can hear a voice. And so that to me, again, it's like, well, what about the 99% of people who don't hear voices? And what about 2/3 of the world or much of the world that cannot read? Like, how do they experience God then? And so I started studying more Eastern stuff and just looking at at what Jesus was doing in his life. And I realized that prayer was more about listening and seeing, that more than maybe just hearing a voice, it was seeing the voice of God. It was through our interaction with people, because you are the Imago Dei, where you're made in the image of God. So there's probably not a more encapsulated understanding and experience of God than through other human beings. And so what if we could see God through the portals of that God has created for us to engage? I said, man, that would be magical. And so that was a large part of it, was just reposturing what I thought about the presence of God, that it's not just when I'm trying to say things to God or just articulate a word or read the word, which is good. All of these things are great. But maybe it's through my experiential piece of living that I can hear God's voice too.
So you were talking about seeing. So what's that practically look like to, instead of just hearing the voice of God, but seeing the heart and voice of God? What's that look like?
Well, so in Genesis 11, they talk about this silo, or Babel, right? And everybody's contained. And that's really the vision of people, is to kind of build and become significant. But the vision he had for us to be free. And so to roam the whole earth. In Genesis, it says, be fruitful and multiply, subdue the whole earth. And so there's a flourishing piece of it. We weren't supposed to live lives contained. And then the second piece, after Genesis, he goes to Genesis 12, and he talks about to be blessed, to bless. And this is the piece where seeing is involved, where when I looked at the concept of blessing, and by the way, this is the mandate he gave to humanity, receive the blessing and release it. So if anybody wants to know their calling, this is essentially it. It's not about your job. I think everybody's looking for the job as like the holy grail. What job am I supposed to do? Well, your occupation is just like a piece of clothing. It's you can express yourself through it. It doesn't necessarily define you, because a lot of the greatest jobs today weren't around 50 years ago.
Right.
You get paid to play video games. How awesome is that? So, but the calling that we have as humans is really to bless people, receive it, get full of God's blessing, and then release it. And so what is blessing is the piece that's significant. It's to see, know, affirm, and give. See, know, affirm, and give. So historically, when you look at the concept of blessing, it's those four components, where the parents saw the child, they knew the child, they affirmed their beauty, who they were, and the legacy that they had generationally. And then they gave to them the inheritance. Everything they had, they would sacrifice to their children. So that's what I say is what we do when it comes to understanding God, is we start practicing this, where we see people, you take the time to lay aside the distractions, really look into their soul with God's eyes. Know their story, affirm the beauty that you're hearing, and then also give to them whatever resource you're supposed to give to them. And so as we do this, where we receive the blessing and we see people and bless others, we start to experience the presence of God. It's like this really beautiful circle that starts to happen.
I mean, just so everybody's clear, that's basically what he did with all of us and with my kids. I mean, you really practice that. I got to watch it firsthand, and it was so powerful. And that this is not just in those moments, but you're almost trying to figure out how do you do this all day long.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. Well, it's not like, I'm forcing it. It's just, it becomes like a natural thing, like, because you're doing work, but sometimes you're just stopping yourself when you're not used to it. And you say, hey, how do I encourage this person maybe without like this feeling like I have to hook it in somehow to bring them to church, or
right,
or win them to Jesus. Because I was trained basically that there's such an urgency to see people come to know Jesus that I'm supposed to witness to everybody. But when you look at Jesus, he didn't do that. That was really the work of the Spirit. He only did what he saw his Father doing. So he didn't heal everybody. He didn't feed everybody. He only did the activity he saw the Father already initiating. And so this type of life is like such a release to me, because we're trained in business school that this is a dog-eat-dog world. You got to go make it happen. Whereas the truth is, biblically, it's already happening. Our job is to dance with God, to figure out where he's moving and flow with him. And so it's more of a presence where you're fully present then in relationship with God. So I love this idea too, because I was reading Ilia Delio. She's an amazing writer, and she's a Franciscan nun, and she wrote a book that no one would buy because it's of the title itself. Because the title and the book cover looks goofy, right? And it says the humility of God. I mean, who's going to buy that book?
Right. That could be the most boring title that's ever been. Right.
But I can tell you this: it's probably been one of the top 3 books I've ever read, and it's significant because she basically says, what if we see God not as the one who's trying to control the universe, but he's he's really trying to relate to the universe. And I go, wow, that just really blew my mind, because that's how he is with us. He's not trying to control us, because love doesn't control the other. It allows a freedom. And so he's relating to us. And often I think that's through the interactions with other human beings, and then with nature, with dreams and visions that he may give us during the day. If you start to feel like understand this, that's not confined to just you're reading the Bible, me just talking one way to God, me just hearing a sermon, everything opens up. And you start to see colors and hear things you never heard before. And I said, this is the goal, that your life would become like Narnia, where every day you open that door, to go out into the world, it's like you're walking into the wardrobe. And you're saying, here it is, God. I'm ready to roll with you.
Yeah. Are there practices that you give people, or that you've kind of put in, or rhythms that you've put into your own life, and now it's become a little bit more
second nature?
Yeah, it's almost come more second nature to you. But were there things that you did early on, or things that you found that have been really helpful that you give to other people, or you invite other people into?
Yeah, I think there's several rhythms that are really significant to do. Number one is the practice of silence, is just not to talk as much, to be known for...
Okay, it's been great having you.
Thanks so much, Dave.
This has been so great. Let's move on to the fun
got
question.
My soul, yeah.
Shortest episode
Okay,
yet.
well, you guys can find us on 10,000minutes.com, and this is great. Dave Gibbons, everybody. Okay, Dave, please continue with silence.
It's to be a listener. I think we're usually really good at listening, and so listening is not just with your ears, it's with your eyes. And so because most of body communication is through your body, or through the vibe you're feeling. Because someone can say something, but they're lying, or they're self-deceived, or they may think they're telling the truth, and they're not. So your body will often demonstrate what's really being said. And so listening is really an art, and it's something I think we've lost. And I think this is what partnerships, like whether it's your spouse or someone you're deeply in love with, a partner, they seek this. They long for someone to understand them, and not to give them solutions, but just to see them. And so that's a gift. That's a divine transaction, a piece that I think we're missing deeply today because of our social media. Yeah, after listening, another rhythm that's important is movement. Especially movement towards marginalized places, or places that you would feel uncomfortable culturally. So like in every city, even in America probably, you could find different cultural zones. But we commonly will just default to people like us, or cultures like us. It's demonstrated by the restaurants of choice or people you hang out with. But look around, walk the city, and ask God to give you his eyes for the city, which is the people usually. And then you start to walk the city, and you start seeing people and cultures, and then start relating to it, by eating the food, getting to know the people. And as you move outside your silo of culture, what happens is your life becomes more colorful, because you start to see these views of God that you didn't see before, because you have the humanity so diverse that as you start to listen and see them, you start to see through their eyes the world in a different light. And so when Black Lives Matter, or when you have the immigration issues that are coming that we see, if you go walk the border, or if you go walk with people in the city, even though you may disagree, if you just let yourself listen, you start to feel some of the angst and pain. No matter what your partisan view may be, if you're just human, you can feel their triggers or their emotions. So that's a very important piece of the discipline, I think, that I practice to understand the presence of God, is go move into those marginalized places. Because theologically, Jesus said, if you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. And so the question it's good to ask ourselves is, who in our world is considered the least of these? Like they may not be the least of these, but to us they are. So go to that place, and that's where you're probably going to find Jesus. An example of this would be I was taking this guy that was working for I think it was a Virgin record label or some company. It was I don't remember, some New York media company, and he went to look at the situation in LA regarding the houseless. And so I said, well, if you really want to experience that more than just a seminar, let's go walk the streets of LA in the row where there's tens of thousands of population of houseless, and I want to show you something. I want you to see how Jesus is there. And so we go there and we start walking. And, the prayer that we were having, because I was walking with my friend named Q, who's an advocate. He's got all types of awards now. But I told Q, I said, why don't you show us around the city, with my friend. And Q, at that time, we were praying, like, should we put more resources here? And so anyways, we're walking the city with this executive and Q. And then this houseless person just starts walking by us slowly. And then as he walks by us, he says, bring Jesus here. Bring Jesus here. We didn't even know who he was. Wow. Since that time, Q has become an established advocate of the houseless in LA, where he's won awards from PBS, the government, the Martin Luther King, Malcolm X awards. I mean, all types of awards. And he's faithfully done this for 15 years.
Wow.
We got seeing, we got listening, we got being quiet.
Movement to the margins.
Movement to the margins. And I mean, just even in our world right now, does that have anything to do? I mean, I just think about our friend group and people that are in my town right now, that it has just become so scattered. I mean, it's like you're choosing sides right now on all the issues that are happening. And it's just getting like further and further and further. These are all Jesus people. And it's just, people are just not belonging at each other's tables anymore. Does that have anything to do with this at all? Or are you talking more about actual margins of the houseless?
Yeah, I think it's a shade and nuance of it. But I would specifically say it's important to culturally engage someone different than you. But what you're talking about too is someone that may also be of different opinion.
I guess you're right.
Which is important too, because it is a nuance of that. And these are people that I would even say that almost feel like they're unforgivable, or they're obstinate, or they've betrayed you. Like, this to me is like the hardest, because culture sometimes even easier than someone who's betrayed you or who's hurt you. Wow. So I would say, how do you love them? Because we are told to bless those who curse us, bless and curse not. And so this exchange of when you go love, the third discipline would be who's unforgivable in your life, who's betrayed you, who disagrees with you regarding BLM or whatever. How do you love them, especially when they don't want to love you? And so I would advocate for what I call a third way embrace. A third way embrace is Romans 14. Where it says, if you're strong, you're supposed to love the weak. And you may be a different opinion, but still respect and come eat at the table together. And so there's an acknowledgement of each other's differences. And usually whoever has their own belief, they think the other person's weak, right? If they think they're the right one.
Totally. I'm smarter, I'm better, I'm right. Yeah.
Yeah. So both people are thinking they're the strong, the other person's the weak. So that's why I like how he just simply says, okay, whoever you are, if you think you're strong, sit at the table and love the weak. And I feel like that's the way we're supposed to go. There's a third way, whether it's with sexuality issues, whether it's partisanship in politics, there's so many differences, pro-life, pro-choice. Well, there's this different ways that we can say we can disagree with a lot of stuff, but can we at least just respect each other as humans and then come together based on Jesus without being weird and religious? We're affirming that we're different, but there's so many things we can work together on. And so let's focus on that, and then let's trust that if one of us is wrong, that we're going to listen to the Holy Spirit to reveal those things. And I'm grateful for it because I've been the recipient of that type of grace where I come from a very fundamentalist background. I mean, strictly fundamentalist to the right of anybody you can think about in America. Women couldn't wear pants. Guys had to get certain types of haircuts. Couldn't go to the movies. No interracial dating. I mean, that was the whole culture of the fundamentalism I grew up in. But, I had so many people that were beyond me in terms of, I think, their understanding of grace and God. And they were patient with me, with my views on women, my views on sexuality, my views on a lot of things. And they didn't beat me over the head with it, nor did they counsel me. They just would ask me, hey, what's your position on that? And how did you come to that? Yeah. And they just asked me nicely these questions, and I let them know. And I said, well, it's biblical. It says this and this and this.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And they go, oh, okay. And I just looked at their response. It was so loving. And then years down the road, it's like, dang it, they were right. And I had to apologize to congregations, to people in the past. I said, man, I was so screwed up on this. I'm really sorry. I really thought it was this because I was trying to be biblical. But I said, for example, I said, I saw an ethic of Christ more than just some of the laws, that there's an ethic of Christ in Matthew 5-7 that he lived his life by that superseded the law. And the ethic was, the Beatitudes. And that was basically the design principles that would always overrule like a lot of the little laws. And so I didn't see my life fundamentally that way. I was always through these black and white yet do and don'ts versus there's a higher level of ethic that Jesus lived his life by. So that changed me. So I'm the recipient of someone who was kind towards me, even though I had a different opinion that was offensive even.
How do you feel as a person coming from a place of like that fundamentalist background? Like, how was your life then in terms of happiness and joy and freedom compared to how you live your life now? Do you feel a tangible difference in your life when you're seeking out these Jesus principles every day in other people?
Yeah, that's a really good
question.
Does that make sense? Yeah, it's a great question. I think initially when I gave my life to Christ in the fundamentalism, it was a good thing because my life was so chaotic. With my parents' divorce, my mom's, she eventually died. She started drinking a lot. So everything was confusing to me. So it was a respite to go into a place where everybody seemed like they had answers. And so it was very black. And I think there's a draw to that. And sometimes maybe,
to it.
Yeah. And maybe also I think if you come from a certain culture where you're in a blue collar culture, they're used to people just telling them what to do too. And so it's like it's a comfortable culture, and where they're not taught to question, and if they are, they're looked upon as rebellious. Now, so after I moved from that, there was things I started to see in terms of challenges, and so when I look back at that moment, I said, "Yeah, it was good for me back then because I think I needed. It felt good for me. Maybe I needed that. I didn't know any better, but as I grew." I saw, no, there's so much freedom in Christ. And some of these things that people act so clear about, where they pound the pulpit really hard, maybe is a sign that they don't have proof because they're kind of overdoing it. They're kind of getting a little over emotional about this. And so if they get a little too loud, it probably means they're not confident
Interesting.
in it. So possibly I need to re-look at this. And then when I re-examine scriptures and I start reading other authors, they say as you go to grad school, you realize like how much you don't know more than when you're in college. And so the more educated you get, the reality is you become more humble, like probably, because you realize there's such a wealth and breadth of information about even one topic. And so I think as I grew older, I instead of just like focusing on proclamation, that was the focus, like proclaim, witness, speak the word, boldness, be courageous, to just say things to people to their face, even though you're offensive. I felt like, no, I don't know that's the way. It seems like it was about being loving, about being a listener. And then maybe instead of your talk, maybe it's more about acting. And instead of just telling a person you love them, go buy them some food because that's what they need. So instead of proclamation, my shift was more about presence. Maybe it's more about my presence and how I communicate the presence of God through my action more than my talk. My talk is secondary to anything that I need to do. So I think that was probably the major shift. And then also this how I viewed maybe connecting with God, that it was such a relegation to certain types of like word things that we discussed before, but maybe it was more integrated in terms of with people, with activities, with nature, that there was a holistic angle of experiencing God.
I love that.
There's a really cool idea, again, with Ilia Delio. She mentions about God being love. And this is huge to me. We say love is like a characteristic of God. But her focus was, well, what if God is like the full embodiment of love? He's entirely love. That's it. He's just love. You say God is like something. Whatever you say God is like, you need to know he's more than that. He's incomprehensible. And then she takes it to the next layer of logic, which is, well, then maybe God is more in the silence and the mystery than we would ever imagine. Because there's so much that we don't know or comprehend. And that gave me such comfort. And I tell people, I used to, and this is a shift too, when I was younger, it's always about having an answer for everything. Where, because the Bible says that be ready to answer every man.
An answer, yep.
Yeah.
Peter, yeah.
But as I get older, I go, no, the greatest apologetic of God is probably the silence and the mystery of who he is. That attracts me more than these airtight, they think logical views of God, which makes no sense to me sometimes.
I find myself getting to a place like that. I'm finally feel like I'm seeing how big God is. He just gets bigger and bigger every day, which gives me more comfort. It's a much less me putting him in this box that we've kind of created, and much more of him saying, oh, no. Check this out. It's so much more than this.
With this Chris, I was just saying, and we don't have to put this in at all, but, this is an example of it. As I'm looking at you, for example, Chris, you're always meant to me, like your original design is actually very creative and inward and introverted sometimes. So you come off as an extrovert, but there's a lot of things where I think you like doing things by yourself. And it's where your mind goes. Like you can play around with things and do it for a while. And then in the play of things, in the solitariness of it all, is when a lot of creative things happen. And so I think there's a side of you where people see you as public, maybe extroverted. You really have the solitary side to you that's natural. And I think you learned how to hustle because you had to, because of whatever background you had that wasn't easy to grow up in. You had to hustle it. But you're normally very natural in terms of like, just being able to be at ease, being by yourself, wandering and playing around. And that's where you're going to probably be the most creative. It's not when you're trying to force it. And then Moe, for example, Moe is also super creative. She was always curious, like always one who questioned things. And then she'd get lost in her imaginations. And I would just see her dreaming about things and always asking multi-layered questions. And then she probably got stunned sometimes when people said things or did something. It was shocking to her because she could never imagine such ill will or evil because things were more fairy-like or Disney-esque in a way as she was younger. So that's the kind of thing, like, as we look at each other, I could be totally wrong what I just said to you guys, but as I'm listening to you, I'm trying to feel what's God doing in you. And it's more fun then. It's more fun, because I want to affirm the beauty in who you are. And when you can do that in the space of work where you're stopping, you're looking at a person, you're really listening to the person, and you're listening to the Holy Spirit. And I don't care if they're Christian or not. It doesn't matter. They're human. Rarely do they have someone that listens and sees them. And rarely does someone point out something that's beautiful about them. And then when you do that, you experience the presence of God. Like I thought I experienced his presence just in that 2 minutes that I was interacting with both of you individually.
Wow.
See what I mean, people? But I think there's something there, Dave, that I'm so curious about you and how you are aware. Because I think your gift is presence. We're talking about practicing the presence of God, but if God is in us, we are actually present with him and present in the moment. And you are so present everywhere you are. I mean, I'm sure there are moments where you are not present, but you've put into rhythms in your life where you're practicing presence always. There's something there that is so beautiful, and I'm just trying to get down to the bottom of what that is and what are the practices and rhythms that just to start to even move towards that awareness of people. And it might just even literally be a spiritual gift that he's given you, and you are this awesome right pointer finger, and that's what you get to have, and I get to be the left toe, which is awesome, and I'm totally great with that too.
Okay, so this is where I need to really try to deconstruct that illusion of like my
perfect. Please do.
Unique giftedness. I'm probably the worst, one of the worst ever in terms of listening and all that. I'm still practicing. I got such a long ways to go. And how do you go about it? I don't know if sometimes it's discipline, but it's first, I think, acknowledging pain in your life and then letting pain have its process, which is to bring you to a point of being a good listener and an observer. All of us have some type of pain, but we busy ourselves maybe trying to cover up the pain, and we anesthetize it by activity or words. So the moment that the Lord used for me, there's two moments that were significant that helped me. One was after just a few years of marriage. I was really super busy running around the church. It was a mega church, and I was taking care of everything. And so, but I was about to go to sleep at night. And if you ask me like how my relationship with my wife is, I would tell you, man, she's my best friend. And we get along really well. But then that night, my wife looked at me right before bed. She says, Dave, and it's like I was about to go into REM sleep, right? So when I hit the bed, I'm out.
Yeah.
But she just all of a sudden this voice comes out because she's a contemplator. She thinks about everything that's said throughout the day, and she goes, "Hey, Dave, I think you really don't know me." And I just like go, And then I said with intrepidation, "What do you mean?" She goes, I think you really don't listen to me." And the next several hours, we unpacked that, and she was right. But it was a shocking revelation to me because literally I thought we were close. And I was living in this illusion of closeness when she was feeling very distant. Because I looked into her eyes and it was scary. I could see like an emotional distancing for her protection. And so I said, hey, give me a chance. I said, I really didn't know. And I said, let me figure. And then I went to God about this. I said, why did I live in this illusion? What are you trying to teach me? He goes, well, if you have trouble listening to a person you see, how difficult do you think it is to listen to a person you don't see? And it was so convicting because I had an illusion of my spirituality that and it was an illusion. I was doing activity of spirituality, but not really connecting relationally and emotion in a way that was integrated. And so, anyway, so that I think that's I'm not a good listener by nature because I do think by nature we are meant to listen well. Because that's why I tell people, I don't think there are people who have an elite level maybe of hearing, but I think for most human beings, you can do above average because it's a muscle that you have. Because he gave you ears, number one, and then he also gave us ability to concentrate and absorb. So that's why babies' heads are so big. They're absorbing so much information when they're young. And, they're processing so much data. They're not speaking, they're just processing. They're mumbling or whatever, but the information's coming in. So I think we have the muscle to listen, but then for whatever reason, whether it's our self-esteem issues or abuse or problems that we suffer, we just start talking too much and try to cover up too much, or we keep things in, don't know how to express it. So I think everybody can develop this muscle, and then it gets better as you practice it. You just have to see, I'm going to screw it up, but I'm going to practice it. And a lot of it happens at the highest levels when you can resolve conflict and deal with your triggers. Those are the two things that will help is conflict resolution and your triggers to take your listening to another level.
To take your listening to another level. So I hope you can see how Dave has practiced and developed a rhythm of listening in his life. I got to experience it firsthand just as his friend, and I want that. I want this ability to see what God sees. We're going to jump into just some questions for Dave here in a second, but after that, Dave then launches back into Chris and to Amoy and speaks into their lives from what he is seeing as he's listening through his eyes, through his spiritual eyes. What might it look like for you to practice this week, seeing with Jesus' eyes? Who might he put in front of you this week to just be more aware of what he's already doing and what he wants to speak to people through you? So then at the very end, Chris and Moy and I just kind of sat there after Dave left the call, and we just discussed and we recorded it. So I think that'll be encouraging to you as well. So here we go. Thank you. I think we can do this the next 5 hours.
Yes.
Dave, before you go, can we ask you a few speed round questions?
Mm-hmm.
This is like first thing that comes to your mind. When I dance, I look like the speed round.
Oh, yeah. I normally don't dance too much, so I look like someone who's very awkward.
Perfect. I love that.
Oh, good.
Okay, the 80s. First thing comes to your mind.
Cool clothes.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, okay, let's go 70s.
Childlike.
Ooh, what's that mean? That's the first thing that came to your mind was childlike about the 70s?
Yeah, there's lots of, it was like the burgeoning of creativity from the 60s. And so I think, the revolutions were happening in the 60s. And so I think there's a new childlikeness to looking at what needs to be created for the new world.
Ooh, good night.
Goodness.
That went somewhere I didn't expect. Okay, pet peeves, Dave.
Oh, it's probably like things that are left scattered and messy around places that should be elegant and minimalistic.
Ooh, is that metaphorical, or is this like literal, like in a room?
It's literal.
Give me an example of that.
Well, it's like my desk area right now. Like there's stuff that people put around it that they shouldn't put around it. It's like,
Not you.
love that.
You didn't put it around there. Someone else did.
Yeah, it kind of makes me feel like uncomfortable.
I have the same thing.
3 words to describe yourself. Quick, go.
Fun, exploratory, cultural.
Ooh.
These are solid answers.
They are so
I
good.
know.
Jeez.
Okay, favorite show ever.
Oh, Matrix was always my number one movie.
Yes.
I think that's a common one. I think in terms of animation would be The Man Who Planted Trees.
I've not seen that.
Ooh, please, The Man Who Planted Trees.
It's a free one on, just type it in YouTube or Vimeo. It's very slow moving, but then it's beautiful in terms of an evolution of life and our purpose.
Gosh.
Looking that up.
Yeah.
I already bought the book you were
my
talking about
goodness.
while we were talking.
Humility of God?
Yeah.
Yeah, just take
cried
your
today.
time. That book, it's like a piece of meat, like good meat. You just got to take your time. Don't feel like you have to read it through. Because I'm literally only in chapter 3, and I've been in it for 3 weeks. And it's just been, I go, wow, this is such a refreshing read for me.
Well, Dave, thank you. So grateful for you. Thanks for your time, man. You've got so much going on, and you would spend it with us, so thank you.
Well, it's great being with you guys. I wanted you to be encouraged because I wanted you to feel free to recover who you are, not to be afraid. And it's because I think sometimes we're shaped by things people didn't say, but also people that did say some things that are very hurtful. And so we respond to it by acting a certain way. And Moe, you have a gift to, I think, write specifically to, and not to be afraid to write and to communicate, speak and write. So your voice needs to be heard more. Stop, don't beat yourself up from what others said. It's really important. You have a lot of really great thoughts and thinking, and just speak up more. And people want to hear what you have to say. And Chris, I see you leading by playfulness. Like a lot of your creativity would come from play, and sometimes it's taking trips, like wandering, meandering around stuff. So when you get stuck, just take a trip.
Let's go.
So good.
I love it.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
You're
for
welcome.
Blessing us today,
Thank
man.
you.
You are. I mean, and it's so funny. Just the word blessing is taken on such a different meaning. When somebody is a blessing,
Yes.
that's kind of what that looks like.
Yep.
So
Yes.
people, let's speak up. Let's listen. Speak up.
Thank you.
May God bless you guys as you continue to feel his presence even in that room.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Okay. So how'd that go? Why did that bring you tears?
I think it's because it kind of shocks you when you're fully seen. And I think it shook me that I hadn't said a word and he knew.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And I think it just like affirms that God really does hear all of the unsaid. And I was like, oh my goodness, obviously this is a safe space. And so I'm happy that it was here.
Yeah.
But there are moments where I'm like, I don't know how to show up. And then for someone to be like, I'm seeing you not show up. I was like, it didn't feel shameful. It just felt like God was like, I see you struggling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, and there's just few moments when someone's just like zoning in on you
Yeah.
and not asking anything in return. Like, I'm just saying this for your benefit.
Yeah.
I hadn't said a word. I hadn't said a word. And I was trying to say words, and I've been trying to say words for weeks. And it was just crazy that someone who doesn't know me was able to say the things that God knows about me. And I was like, oh my gosh. It's just those moments where you're like, no, you're real. You're real, and you really do love me.
Yeah.
You really do see me.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to do something to be understood.
You're just seen.
Yeah. I don't know. It just kind of shook me. So I think I'm emotional because I'm like, it wasn't just like, this is your beauty. It was like, and also like, stop hiding. And I was like, I'm trying.
Yeah.
So
He was calling out something that already exists.
Yeah.
I mean, and not just in a, I love your heart, I love the way you do this.
Exactly.
Right.
It was actually, it wasn't a rebuke. It was an
wasn't.
invitation almost from God. And I love that how he's like, and I remember when he would do this with my kids and with us, it wasn't like, this is the gospel. It's like, take this for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could totally be wrong. And I
Yeah.
love that even ability to be curious and throw it out there.
yeah. And I don't know, the specific details, like, and I think you're right. And I'm like, I do. And
Yeah.
I feel stuck.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think you don't speak up. And I'm like, I don't. Stop it.
Yeah.
But
Quit
even-
looking at me.
Yeah,
Close your
don't
eyes.
look at me, man. I was like, when is it Chris' turn again? But like, I was like, come on, man. I'm struggling today. But even like the rebuke part, I think I've been rebuking myself. And so for him to not do it,
Yeah.
again, went back to permission. Like, you're allowed to still feel like you want to hide, but maybe you shouldn't. So I was like, okay, I'm not feeling rushed to process why I feel so distant lately. But I'm not so distant that God can't see that I'm struggling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and it was just so gentle. I was like, "Wah." So, I mean, my tears, I'm a hot mess right now. We won't take pictures for the, show notes. But I think it's more of like being touched by God than being exposed by God.
Right.
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 I think it's more of like him just like inviting me to be transparent without it being like not enough, So I was like, I can be struggling right now and it still be beautiful and enough. And someone called it out and I was like, yeah, that's something. That's where you are. I was like, okay. Just crazy. That was a crazy moment. And to know that could exist at any moment.
Yeah.
If
right.
we were like willing to acknowledge, going back to like being filled by the fact that we are blessed to bless others.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the core of it, right? Like maybe I'm not in a place where I've been feeling like I could bless others.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't show up, you know? It's layered. He's right. I ask multi-layered questions. I get lost in these layers. And I was like, listen, bro, it's only been 35 minutes. But yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, and Chris, he nailed you
He
pretty.
nailed
He
me
did.
so
I
hard.
was looking at you like, oh my God.
I don't know. I don't have a clue how. I mean, it's Zoom, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, yeah, I'm an introvert, like big time. And I've had to learn how to be an extrovert because of what I do. And because I've learned that that's what got me the thing I needed. Right?
Yeah.
So
Because of your past. I mean,
because of my past,
your
like,
story.
hey, be good at this, be good at that, and it will, take care of all these other things, right? So yeah, that's how I've lived my whole life. And I don't freaking play. I'm bad at it. I don't like to do it. I feel like adulthood has been this journey of, I'm not going to get emotional. Maybe Lord, but like it's been this journey of figuring out how to do that again. And I in my head I think like, who was I when I was like 17, like or 9, and so it's like these moments of figuring out how to play, and I don't know how he saw that other than like the Spirit of God speaking through him, and so now I'm going to go book a trip. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what he told me to do. So
because it ends up aligning with what you do really want to do.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was just talking to Kinsey about stuff last night about like, just in the nature of all of these things where I'm trying to show up and create or do things or like honestly create my own path or way. And I was just like, I don't know how to do the next one. And I literally told her, I was like, I don't think what I've done is going to work again. And, and that's kind of how I went to sleep last night. And so waking up and hearing that, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go book a trip and see if I can figure out what it is,
Yeah.
and just let it go and try to find that like playfulness. And, but he got me. I can sit in a room by myself and be perfectly happy. That's kind of my happy place most of the time. So it's powerful. And so for me now, like what I'm thinking is like, well, how the heck do I become that person for other people?
Yeah.
And can I make somebody else that I've known for 30 minutes feel as good as he made us feel? That seems like kingdom of heaven stuff to me.
Totally. And it's not just feeling good, because I can say empty words that are
Right.
just sweet and like,
You're
you're
right.
so pretty today, or Chris, your voice is so great,
Right,
or
which
you're
we've
such a
gotten
good
we're good
basketball
at
player.
that, like,
yeah.
and that's part of like the coping mechanism or whatever we're doing to like control a situation. You can be funny, we can put on these things,
Right.
Yeah.
but he didn't do that.
No,
he
he-
like came to the core of us.
Yeah, there was like an actual spirit leading
Yes.
thing. It's like when I was on the road with the Big Daddy Weave guys, and they said we'd pray with people after every single night, and that was the encore. And they're like, don't just pray over people with your psychology, like with the things that we know how to say. I know how to pray
Right.
and get you to feel this way at the end of a prayer. I just do.
Yep.
And they're like, that might help people for a night.
Yeah.
But what's God actually saying? What's he maybe want to say to this person? How do you, in a sense, join him in that moment saying something to those people? Because that's going to last a lifetime. And it was almost like that's what he just did right there, is he is listening to the Spirit of God while listening to you. I mean, it's just this crazy rhythm. That's why I was asking, like, how do you do it, man?
Yeah.
And so I don't know what the practice is. I don't know if you guys heard what the practice was. I mean, you just even was talking about see, know, affirm, and give.
I love that.
That right there.
But there are just different rhythms and awarenesses that I want to walk with in this realm with spiritual eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so happy that he did that with you guys.
Man.
I
did.
mean,
But that's it. Like that.
He was just like, time out. I got something to say.
Yeah.
You don't have to put this in.
Yeah.
I was like,
I'm like,
oh, okay.
I was like, that may be all we put in. I don't know.
I was like, I'm down. And I was like, Chris, got him. But then when he said my name, I was like, no, please. Don't put me in, coach, the one time.
Okay, people. Well, that's all we got. We're just going to go cry somewhere. So.
That was good.
Go listen to 80s
So I guess
ballads.
our encouragement this week, and whatever you're getting out of this, people, please let us know what you're hearing and what you heard, and maybe what the Spirit of God might be telling you to remind us of. But it's this idea of seeing what's going on, not just listening, but it's like listening through seeing, and just awareness of all the things going on, presence, and then knowing people's story. Which I think there's also like a spiritual element of that, because there's he heard both of your stories without you saying anything,
without us giving him anything.
so that's like a spiritual level of knowing people's story. It's a presence with the Spirit in that giving, which is an action.
It could be a lot of different things.
Yeah. Anyways, you people, you probably know more than we do, because we just sat here listening in awe. So
No,
We're
yeah,
processing along
real
with
talk.
you.
No
Yeah.
one's really blinked in like a minute.
No.
okay. Bye.